Well, then let's go ahead and get started, and thank all who've joined us, certainly all the commission members and our staff and anyone else who's going to be making presentations and commenting on today's items. So we'll call to order then the Thursday, January 21st, 2021 meeting of the Delta Protection Commission, and acknowledge that we're doing this remotely. And before I read into the record, just some information that's important for the public that's on, as well as all of us. Could I have someone call the roll to establish a quorum, please?
You bet. Chair Natoli.
Here.
Vice Chair Wynn. Repeating Vice Chair Wynn. Commissioner Villegas.
Present.
Commissioner Burgess.
Present.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Present.
Commissioner Fuller.
Present.
Commissioner Nakanishi.
Here.
Commissioner Paroli.
Present.
Commissioner Kim. Repeating Commissioner Kim.
That would be Commissioner Agar,
I apologize.
Madam Clerk.
Agar.
Commissioner Agar is here.
Commissioner Ross.
That would be
Lester Moffitt.
Here.
Commissioner Vogel.
Here.
Commissioner Bush.
Present.
And do we have ex officio member Assemblyman Jim Frazier joining us? Okay, thank you, Charles. I did see your message. So Assemblyman Frazier might be joining us in a little bit here.
Good. Well, thank you, Sis, for calling the roll. We do have a quorum. And with that, I believe we have a flag to be portrayed on the screen. And if not, I would ask Commissioner Vasquez if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I guess I can't lead if I don't have my mic on. Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for
which it stands.
one nation,
Under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Okay. You probably see on the screen rules for attendees as to participate. Let me read into the record because this is being done via Zoom, that and that's being done obviously to reduce the community transmission of COVID-19, which we're certainly all very well aware of, and hopefully people are remaining healthy and safe as we do this remotely. Would note that members of the public can join by telephone if they haven't already, by calling 1-888-363-4734 and then entering the conference code, again, just for the record, 388-754. And this information, of course, is located on top of the meeting agenda, and all the meeting materials are available on the Delta California Gov site. Also, we just ask if you would please, to mitigate any background noise, to mute yourselves when you're not speaking. And for those on Zoom, the PowerPoint slides will be displayed on the screen. These slides are also posted at the website as noted for those joining by telephone. And then as a note that's up on the screen, if you're interested in providing public comment, please use the raise the hand icon in the Zoom. On phone, I guess you could use keypads to unmute yourself if you'd like to make a public comment, and we'll have assistance with recognizing folks and making sure that you get an opportunity to speak when when the item is up that you want to speak to. And again, I want to just thank everyone for joining the meeting and attending remotely. And I know we know this is a bit unprecedented, although we've been doing it now for a number of months, and hopefully we'll be able to resume sometime later this year for in-person meetings. So with that, again, we appreciate people's patience and participation. So as we jump in, and we've done a roll call, but I want to extend a welcome to some of our, certainly to some of our new members, and Assemblymember Jim Frazier, and who's also going to join us remotely. And some of our new commission members, though, are, and he led us in a Pledge of Allegiance, Supervisor John Vasquez from Solano County, and then Council Member George Fuller from Oakley, City Councilman there, and representing the cities of Contra Costa and Solano counties. And I think we still have one vacancy. Is that correct, Eric? We're waiting for the COG appointment for Sacramento.
That's correct.
Okay. And would also recognize Senator Galgiani, who was an ex officio member for some time, and I know that having left the state service in that capacity, well, we want to thank her for her participation. And as I kind of also go down to the list of folks who have left us, at least on the Delta Protection Commission, I want to thank outgoing West Sacramento Mayor Christopher Cabalden and his recent alternate, which was outgoing Councilmember Beverly Sandine, for their service. And he was a member of the commission for many, many years. And would also note that Oakley City Council member Michael Krieg for his service as commission member. And so those four people, which includes Senator Galgiani, have served on this commission. We appreciate their attention to all the matters that relate to the Delta, and certainly this commission's charge and ongoing work, and we thank them for their service. Did I miss anybody, Eric?
No, you did not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, very good. Are any of those folks with us today by any chance? I'd give them a chance to make parting comments, but I'm not so sure that they are. Anyone?
I don't believe that they are. No.
Okay, all right. Well, very good. Okay, so with that, and then our new members, we had some new appointees. I recognize them as well. Okay, already. Make sure I've got them. Okay. Then moving on, we'll move down to public comment. And this is an opportunity for, as noted on the screen, for members of the public to address the commission regarding items that don't appear on the agenda, and certainly an opportunity for people to register comments on any matter of interest to them. And I would now reach out to our clerk. Do we have any folks that wish to address the commission during this part of the agenda?
Chair Natoli, there were no public comments.
Okay. All right. And with that, then moving to the next item, there's a okay, muted. I see that there, so I guess I was talking too long. Can you hear me now, Eric?
Yeah, you were muted for a bit.
Okay.
I forgot to tell you, Don, you're on a timer as chair. That's right.
Yeah, I get that. You must have given it to Vasquez. He's probably pushing that button. He did 30 seconds for Natoli. That's it, right, John?
Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe Oscar's running that now. So I didn't know about that. Okay. Anyway, on with this. So this is an opportunity for commissioner comments or announcements. And again, we can do this at the end of the meeting as well. But anything at this juncture in our agenda?
Mr. Chair, this is Dennis Agar here representing Agency Secretary Kim office.
Yes. Hey, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right time to give my update, but I wanted to just share that I had full intentions to share, like I did last time, an updated Caltrans Delta construction map. Unfortunately, District 4, who is the owner of that map, is updating it currently. I want to let everybody know that as soon as I get that done, it will be sent to all the members here through Erik Vink, so that everybody has the latest update. And I hope to give a better update at our next upcoming commission meeting. In addition to that, I'm always looking for additional outreach that we committed to in each of our 3 districts. In District 3 and in District 4. And as we continue to do that, I'll reach out to Executive Director Vink to get any additional contacts in the Delta to, again, send out the appropriate notices for upcoming projects this coming spring and summer. I'm going to end with that. And unless anybody has questions, again, I will send out the updated map as soon as I get them available.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you certainly for you and your colleagues' commitment to provide that. And you know, there hasn't been much downturn in the construction season with the fair weather we've had, but certainly as we move towards spring and summer with projects that may be on the docket that haven't, you know, yet commenced, that'll be important. Certainly that coordination effort. So thank you for the update. Let me ask any questions or comments from members of the commission to Mr. Agar's comments. Okay.
All right.
If not, we'll look forward to that map. And thanks again, Dennis. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Others, any comments, announcements at this juncture? Okay. All right. With that, then we'll keep moving down through the agenda. We'll go to our consent agenda, which is the consideration of the approval of the November 19th, 2020 meeting minutes. Let me ask first for commissioners, any corrections or modifications to the minutes, and then I'll ask for any public comment. Okay, hearing nothing from the commission. Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on the consent item?
Chair Natoli, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, very good. Okay, back to the commission then. Motion would be in order.
Mr. Chair, this is Villegas. I would move consent.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Burgess, I'll give you a second.
Okay, so moved by Villegas, seconded by Burgess for approval of the consent matter. If there are no further comments, then if you please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Chair Natoli,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nguyen,
Yes.
Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burgess,
Aye.
Commissioner Vasquez,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller,
Aye.
Commissioner Nakanishi. Repeating, Commissioner Nakanishi,
Aye.
Commissioner Paroli,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Agar,
Aye.
Commissioner Lester Moffitt,
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel,
Aye.
and Commissioner Bush.
Aye.
Chair Natoli, the motion carries by a vote of 13-0.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Okay, that does the consent calendar, and so we'll move down to our regular agenda. And as you'll note, now at the juncture where we have the Executive Director's report. Mr. Vink.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commission members. Happy 2021. A few items I'd like to report on. First off, the Delta Conveyance Project, the single tunnel project. Since the last commission meeting, we've had some discussion with staff for the conveyance project about the proposed community benefit program. That's something that they will be going out to the Delta community. Some of our commission members might have already been briefed on this, but in essence, this is the project's way of going above and beyond mitigation requirements to address how they protect and enhance the unique Delta values as they go about completing the single tunnel project. So that's something that everyone will be hearing more about in the coming months as they develop that further. We also continue to participate in the regular stakeholder engagement committee and design and construction authority meetings. And finally, we are participating in the Corps of Engineers Section 106, that's the National Historic Preservation Act process as it would relate to historic and cultural resources that might be affected by this project. So that's Delta Conveyance. Moving on to the second item I wanted to report on, which is the Prop 1 Delta levies discussion that was initiated at our commission meeting in November. And we had a pretty, the commission members had a pretty healthy discussion on that item at that time. Since November, we have had 3 meetings with DWR's Steve Rothert. He's the chief of multi-benefit initiatives, and with Robert Charney, who is the chief of the Delta Levies programs. And I see that Robert's joined us for the meeting, so thank you, Robert. And those meetings have included Delta Levy engineers, water agencies, and flood agency representatives. So we've had a pretty good core, but a group with very deep knowledge of Delta levies. That includes Gilbert Cosio, who I see has joined our meeting as well. And what we're doing is, at this point, working toward what it would look like for greater collaboration. This is at least my hope, greater collaboration between those Delta levy interests and the DWR Prop 1 funding decisions. And it's worth noting that the governor's budget that was released a couple of weeks ago proposes nearly $80 million from that Prop 1 Delta levy pot, almost entirely for the type of things that those Delta levy interests have been asking for. 68 million for both the levy subventions and special projects programs. Most of that will be for special projects. That money will unfold over the next several fiscal years. And then an additional $9.5 million for the Delta Emergency Response Program, which is also called out specifically in Proposition 1. And only $1 million earmarked for a project, in this case, YOLO bypass fix in place. So I'm really encouraged by the discussions that we've had. I'd like to see us advance those discussions further and end up in a place where there could be greater involvement from the Delta levy community in future DWR funding decisions over Proposition 1. But it's worth noting at the same time that those funds have been reduced significantly given this proposed nearly $80 million in the fiscal year 21-22 state budget, even as that money will be spent out over several succeeding fiscal years. So we had our last conversation last week. We need to do a little regrouping about moving forward. And I'll continue to provide an update to the commission, but at this time, what's proposed in the governor's budget, I think, is very favorable and something that I believe we all can be supportive of. Moving on to the Delta National Heritage Area, we convened our first advisory committee meeting. That's the advisory committee for helping us pull together the required management plan. That was on January 5th, and it was an opportunity to both introduce the advisory committee members to each other, but also to the management plan process. And a thank you to Commissioner Villegas for participating in that meeting. The group will next meet on March 4th. Moving on to broadband in the Delta, this is something that we are emphasizing and follows on some early work that we did with the nonprofit group Valley Vision to document areas of deficiency. We're continuing to hone that documentation of where broadband is deficient in the Delta by asking Delta internet users to report their internet speeds to the California Public Utilities Commission. And there's a real easy way of doing that by downloading an app called CalSpeed. And we believe that documenting those deficiencies will create a stronger case for any proposed grant proposals in the future, anything that we can reach out for and support improved broadband and internet access in the Delta. So we'll be talking with the commission more about that in the future. Moving on to the Delta Leadership Program, as commission members are probably aware, we are not convening a Delta Leadership Program this year. We're taking a hiatus, but we are convening the alumni for the program via Zoom. We'll start that out with some sessions on personal strategic planning that will convene tomorrow. And we're real excited about the opportunity to help create some greater cohesion amongst the alumni over 5 annual programs. And in addition to this personal strategic planning, we will also provide some programmatic seminars for them as well. I'm working on one around the proposed tunnel project that I think will be of great interest to the participants. Just a few items to wrap up. The commission's proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget was also released in early January. It's a baseline budget. It does have a slight augmentation, a one-time augmentation that will help us move our administrative service support, which is currently provided by the California State Lands Commission. It will allow us to move that over to the California Department of General Services effective July 1 of 2021. And commission members may or may not be aware, but because we are such a small commission staff, we do contract for administrative services, including accounting assistance, budget, human resources, and procurement. And we are thankful for the support that California State Lands Commission has been providing us, and their demands internally are growing significantly, and that's necessitating our move over to Department of General Services to provide that support. We've already had initial meetings with Department of General Services, and we're feeling good about the service and support that we will receive there. It does end up costing us a little bit more, and that's the reason for this one-time augmentation that we'll see in our commission budget. The only other change to the commission budget is that we have been, and other agencies, all state agencies have been asked to absorb a 5% reduction to their operating expenses. And in our case, that would total about $34,000, but we feel we have the ability to absorb that within our budget in the coming fiscal year. And then finally, I'm happy to answer any questions about the land use comment letters, which were pretty minimal over the past 2 months. The metrics provided on our commission website and social media, and the commission project updates, and the current snapshot of our fiscal year 20-21 budget. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's my report, unless there are any questions from commission members.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, go ahead. Comment? Hearing no comments or questions from commission members, thank you, Eric. Let me ask Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to comment on the Executive Director's report? Madam Clerk?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, very good. Okay. Last chance. Any member of the commission want to ask Mr. Vink any questions? If not, I want to thank Eric and the staff for a lot of work embodied in those comments, and appreciate the update on each of them. Okay. All right. If nothing further, then we'll move to item number 7, which is the Delta Protection Advisory Committee report. And once again, we have Mr. Pruner with us, the DPAC chair, and thank him for his leadership and invite him to provide an update as to the DPAC's ongoing work. Mr. Pruner.
Thank you, Chair Natoli, members of the commission. Our your committee met in January, if I may just kind of expand a bit on the report that's part of your packet, I want to note that Jim Starr, who is with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a long-term member, is going to be leaving us due to retirement, is going to be replaced by Gina Van Kloppenberg. And I just want to point out that over time, Jim has been an excellent state agency member of the committee. He's been active and especially has been as the lead person in some of the invasive species programs, has kept us up to date, and just been a great member, and we'll miss him greatly. And I'm confident that Gina will completely fill his shoes. I also want to note that I think, as you can see in your report, that I'm thankful to the committee for re-electing me as chair for the coming calendar year, and Barbara Daly as vice chair. So we have two people who live in the Delta, in addition to having direct personal interests in the Delta Protection Commission's work. And so I was glad to hear, I was thankful for that. Something else we did, a matter of just business, I guess, and in trying to improve and upgrade continually the work and the process and the structure of the committee, the committee unanimously decided to move to a structured meeting schedule for the calendar year to meet approximately 2 weeks before the commission meeting. That we picked that spot, and I think we're working with Erik in the exact timing of those meetings throughout the calendar year. But the idea was to meet fairly close to the next proximate commission meeting, so we could hopefully provide the most timely input that we could in connection with the agenda, and also structure our meetings again with the cycle, every other month cycle of the commission. So we passed and took that action. One of the reports that we received, which I thought was of particular importance, was the report hot off the press by Janet Barbieri, who's a communications manager at DWR. And she introduced us in an informal but formal way to a proposed Delta Conveyance Community Benefit Program. You may recall that when the twin tunnels went before the Stewardship Council, one of the primary objections to a consistency finding with the Delta plan was the lack or the inadequacy of reaching out to the Delta communities in kind of an equitable justice, fairness concept, to evaluate the impacts of the project beyond just statutory mitigation, to look at communities, how they would be damaged and what could be done. And DWR, fairly shortly before the hearing began, floated the idea of a community benefit program or agreement with a funding number, I recall, potentially, no commitments exactly, but well over $100 million. I'm aware that that concept has been discussed sort of on and off among the water contractors this past calendar year, but now we have the program actually starting to take shape. And I'm hopeful that the commission will have an opportunity to weigh in on this this coming year. I do believe, this is my opinion, that the community benefit program or community benefit agreement idea will become a major topic in the Delta in 2021. DWR's proposal is to conduct a series of meetings and interviews, put together a draft report, put out the report for comment, receive that comment, perhaps make changes, and then attach the community benefit program as an appendix to the draft environmental impact document. Our concern is that that sounds like a DWR-led program. There's no definition who they will contact, whether the contacts and the information will be representative of Delta concerns, and there's very little structure at this point in what benefits, how they're going to be measured, governed, money or assets distributed, lots and lots of questions. So I'm both introducing that and reporting to you that I think this will be a big deal coming up in calendar 2021. We also received reports on the Stewardship Council, and I see that I believe that the chair of the Stewardship Council is on and going to give a report which may be somewhat the same as what we received. That was a very good report, both the climate change adaptation report I'm sorry, and Harriet did a good job. Let me just say that. I'll leave it. I don't want to take anything away from that. That was a very good discussion. The stakeholder committee for the water contractors, the SEC Stakeholder Engagement Committee gave a report. I want to note that the next meeting of that Stakeholder Engagement Committee is January 27, and the website for receiving the materials and participating, at least listening to those meetings, which are, I think, very informative, is dcdca.org, dcdca.org. And that's my report, Mr. Chair, at the moment, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark, and appreciate, again, congratulations on being elected chair, you and Barbara as vice chair, and our thanks to Jim Starr for his service. Let me turn to commission members then. Any questions or comments about the DPAC report and matters that were covered by Mr. Pruner?
Mr. Chair? This is,
yes.
Commissioner Villegas. Yeah, so maybe it's a question for Erik. Erik, do you, or maybe it's too soon, but what do you see the role of the Delta Protection Commission, as it were, relative to the community benefits program that was just articulated by Mark? I'm curious, kind of how do you see that playing in, if, as it turns out, we've seen iterations of it before, and I suspect, as Mark indicated, it may play a more prominent role moving forward. And so, so I'm curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Villegas. I'd really love to hear the thoughts of commission members on that. My primary interest at this point is just ensuring that they are making a connection within the Delta community as the proponents put more detail onto that program. It's very conceptual at this point. I don't see anything really to object to in what they've laid out so far, but as they add more details to that, there certainly might be concerns and things to take issue with. So my intention will be just to continue to follow that, and as we get more detail, I would like to bring it before the commission and have an opportunity to discuss with you. But at this point, I feel like it's so conceptual in nature, it probably isn't worth spending a lot of time on just yet.
Perfect. That was my sentiment as well. I just wanted to know if that's what you were thinking. So good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Thank you, Oscar. Other questions or comments? All right. Well, thanks once again, Mark. Appreciate your work and that of your committee, and look forward to next report in March when we next convene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to ask if there's any public comments, Madam Clerk. I'm sorry. Does anybody wish to?
Yeah, I don't.
No hands raised currently.
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay, good. Is that what I need to ask you? Is there any hands raised? Maybe I'm asking the question wrong. There's a little pause in there. So, okay. All right. Thank you for watching for that. Okay, seeing no public comment, then we will move on again with our thanks. Okay, takes us down to item 8 then on our agenda, the consideration and approval of the Delta Protection Commission 2020 annual report. Mr. Vink has an overview of this for us, and then and we'll take any questions and comments, both commission members as well as the public. So Erik, back to you again.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair and commission members, I also neglected to introduce earlier Andrew Vogel, who is our counsel for the evening from the Attorney General's office. Nicole Rinke will be back with us as acting counsel while Carlos Mejia is on family leave. So we're getting the benefit of a lot of different legal expertise with us over these months when Carlos is on family leave. But I expect that Nicole will join us for the next meeting, and then the meeting following that, we'll see Carlos again. So thank you, Andrew, for joining us, and welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Andrew.
So item number 8 is our 2020 annual report. The statute, Public Resources Codes 29780, requires that we report annually to the governor and legislature. This report is, we're trying to get this more and more condensed, and this report's a little bit condensed from the last few years, but I don't think skimps at all on reporting the progress that the commission's made during calendar year 2020. And just a few highlights, because, you know, a year is always a good time to reflect back. Actions related to the Delta Conveyance Project, whether it's the monitoring of the meetings, but also our extensive comments on the notice of preparation and notice of intent for the environmental documents. The release of the Ag Chapter update to the Economic Sustainability Plan, specifically the state of Delta agriculture, that found nearly $1 billion, with a B, billion dollars worth of farm gate value in the Delta in crop year 2016. We advanced the management plan, planning efforts for the National Heritage Area, including the formation of the advisory committee. And then we advanced Delta Trail planning as well. Those are just a few of the highlights. There are others embedded in the report. What I'm asking for this evening is the Commission's approval of the 2020 annual report so that we may transmit it to the governor and legislature, and we make a special effort to get it to the offices of our Delta Legislative Caucus. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Thank you, Erik. And you all have that in your packet, and would first then go to commission members. Any questions or comments about the plan and its submittal or any of the content? Okay, sounds like you did a good job there, Mr. Vink. Let me ask, any hands raised, members of the public that wish to address this item?
Chair Natoli, there are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, one last call for anybody who wants to weigh in. Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion to approve the annual report and then for submitting it to the legislature and to the administration. Call for a motion.
Judge Villegas, I would move that we approve and submit.
This is
Okay.
This is Commissioner Vogel. I second that motion.
Okay, very good. So Commissioner Villegas moved and seconded by Commissioner Vogel to approve the annual report and then in the submittal to the appropriate parties. All right, if there's no further comments or questions from commission members, then I will call for the roll. Madam Clerk.
Chair Natoli,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wynn. Repeating, Vice Chair Wynn. Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Vasquez. Repeating, Commissioner Vasquez,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller,
Aye.
Commissioner Nakanishi,
Aye.
Commissioner Paroli,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Agar,
Aye.
Commissioner Lester Moffitt,
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel, repeating, Commissioner Vogel, Commissioner Bush.
Aye.
I'm going to circle back. Vice Chair Nguyen. Looks like the motion will carry with a vote of 12.
Yes, for Commissioner Nguyen.
Oh, thank you. Motion will carry with a vote of 13-0.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner members and Madam Clerk. Okay, with that then we'll move down our agenda to item number 9, which is we're very pleased to have with us the chair of the Delta Stewardship Council, Tatayon, and Harriet Ross, who will be introduced by Tatayon in just a moment, but want to welcome folks to present to us an update on Stewardship Council activities, Delta ADAPTS program. And before I turn to DSC Chair Tatayon, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Villegas once again for his service the past 2 years as the chair of his representative. Informed on a regular basis about the council's work and activities, certainly in summary, and appreciate his leadership and work. And so we thank you, Oscar, for your efforts. And I know that you worked very closely with Chair Tatayon during your time on the council. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll welcome Chair Susan Tatayon to introduce the topic and our other presenters. So welcome, Susan.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Natoli and commission members. I too want to thank Supervisor and Commissioner Oscar Villegas for his work on the council. I have to let you know that Oscar, from the very beginning, offered excellent advice. He's pragmatic, he's solution oriented, and we already miss him. I also want to say,
he warned you about me, so
yeah.
Susan, can you share that with my wife?
What, the solution oriented part? Or?
Sure.
And I do want to welcome Chair Natoli to the council. We had the privilege of swearing Chair Natoli in remotely in this virtual world. That was how we had to do it. And I so look forward to working with you, Chair Natoli. For those who don't know, Chair Natoli was on the inaugural Delta Stewardship Council, and he worked with that council for thousands of hours, many years, to actually develop the Delta Plan. The Delta Plan, which has really been guiding progress toward the COE goals. So I look forward to your time on the council, Chair Natoli. Is it possible for me to share my screen? I'm sorry I didn't get these slides to you sooner, but if I could just share a very short slide presentation with you, is that possible?
Turn to Erik and Madam Clerk, whoever's handling all the technology. Can you do that?
Yeah, I believe it should be possible for our either the clerk or for James or
whoever's sharing now, if they could just stop sharing. Susan, I think you could share once that share's taken down.
Okay. I think that's Harriet's.
I'm not actually sharing my screen yet, so okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Susan, I think you can go ahead now. We just changed the setting that multiple participants can share. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No one run crazy with this now.
So can you see my first slide here?
Not yet, Susan.
Let's see here. Let me try this again. Share.
There you go. It's coming up now.
Okay. Great.
Looks good.
Great. So 2020, what a year it was. And I am so grateful that the council was able to continue advancing initiatives that we had planned for 2020, despite the upheaval and uncertainty brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll start by really expressing deep appreciation and celebrating our information technology team. We went virtual in less than a month. These pros gave us the ability to continue our work, and from the time Governor Newsom issued the stay-at-home order on March 19, we transitioned to 100% teleworking by April, which to me is phenomenal. And this quick, efficient transition allowed us to continue progress. Another item I am very, very glad to report that after 7 years of litigation about the validity of the Delta Plan and the council's authorities, the California Court of Appeal for the Third Appellate District upheld the council's central authority over sustainable management of the Delta. And it issued this decision on April 10. It's 2020. It's a published decision. And on every single issue regarding the legality of the Delta Plan, the court sided with the council. And this was no small effort. So I want to congratulate the council staff, the legal team, and the Delta Plan is in effect. And the court acknowledged the broad discretion the Delta Reform Act confers to the council. So in May, we moved forward on the ecosystem amendment. The council reviewed a preliminary draft of a proposed amendment to the ecosystem chapter of the Delta Plan, Chapter 4. And this amendment was developed with extensive feedback from state and federal agencies, peer reviewers, stakeholders, the public. And it focuses on ecosystem-based management of the Delta. And I won't go into the details of ecosystem-based management, but feel free to contact me if you'd like to know more about that. But the idea really is to be more efficient, getting ecosystem restoration projects on the ground, and be much more effective in what types of restoration projects are created in what locations. And as you probably know, we have completed the first ever climate change vulnerability assessment of the Delta. This too was a major effort, I think over 18 months. The Delta Adapts initiative has 2 phases, and Harriet will be telling you more about that. Phase 1 is the vulnerability assessment. Phase 2 is the adaptation, development of the adaptation strategy. And this effort included hundreds of hours of public outreach and stakeholder engagement, and extensive input from a technical advisory committee. The advice and input from that committee, from community-based organizations and stakeholders and the public to help us complete this vulnerability assessment. And we released a draft of the assessment last Friday for public comment. This collaborative effort will continue in 2021 as we embark on phase 2 of Delta Adapts, which is to begin developing that adaptation strategy for the Delta region. So on the science front, quite a bit of work. Our Delta Science program began updating the Science Action Agenda, which will identify near-term science actions, identify major gaps in knowledge, promote collaborative science, and build a much more effective Delta Science enterprise. And a primary goal of the Science Action Agenda is to strengthen the connections between the policy decisions and problems that natural resource managers face to the kind of science needed to support effective policy and decision making. It's a major focus this time around. Last spring, the Delta Science Program began work with the Delta Independent Science Board on a science needs assessment. Before starting to draft that assessment, the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee and the Delta Independent Science Board co-hosted a 4-part discussion series over the summer and a 2-day fall workshop. And during these virtual forums, policymakers, scientists, stakeholders, and others shared their concerns about how to better prepare for increasingly rapid change in the Delta. Also last spring, the Delta Science Task Force released its final strategy for better supporting integration of social science in planning and science aimed at improving long-term management of the Delta. And to take immediate action on 2 of the task force recommendations, we partnered with the California Sea Grant to hire a social science extension specialist who will advance collaborative partnerships and catalyze research that will inform our decision-making in the social science realm related to Delta Plan implementation. And so I'm thrilled to announce that we hired our first social scientist, Dr. Jessica Rudnick, and she began developing a comprehensive social science agenda for the Delta in December. And our work on Delta Adapts and the proposed amendment to the ecosystem chapter of the Delta Plan and almost all our work is informed by insights gained from the Delta Plan performance measures. And if you haven't checked out our performance measures dashboard, I would encourage you to do so. There's an awful lot of data there. You can dive as deep as you want or stay at a very high level. We've been operating this dashboard since 2019. We're continuing to refine it and hope to have it be a much more open, transparent, and collaborative system for sharing scientific information relating to Delta Plan implementation and Delta science. And I can't emphasize enough that this is an endeavor that few have accomplished. It is really difficult to nail down performance measures, especially in a system as complex as the Delta. And this dashboard, I think, will become a vehicle for sharing a lot of data, a lot of good science. And with that, thank you for this opportunity, and I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Susan. Questions by commission members or anyone else?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Agar.
Yes, yes.
A question, Susan, and thank you for your great presentation there for the Stewardship Council and what they're able to accomplish. My question is regards to the Delta vulnerability assessment that was created in the Delta. And as you know, Caltrans is also endeavoring into climate action as well. In all 3 districts, we've actually completed our climate vulnerability assessments in District 3. Again, that's in the Sacramento area, the Bay Area, District 4, and of course, San Joaquin County here in District 10. And coming into this position here, I wasn't sure if there's been a lot of coordination with each of the Delta's vulnerability assessment compared to what we've created and actually developed. And we're already on the 2nd phase as well as far as climate adaptation in each of our districts, not just the 3, but across the state.
Well, I think that's a perfect transition to Harriet Ross's presentation. Harriet has been living and breathing the Delta vulnerability assessment, and she has a great presentation. She can certainly answer your question better than I.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I'll hand it over to Harriet.
Okay, good. Thanks again, Susan. Really appreciate it, and thank you for being with us. And okay, Harriet, you're up.
Okay, can you all hear me okay? Good. Sound
Yes.
volume good? Okay. Well, good afternoon, Chair Natoli and members of the commission. Again, I'm Harriet Ross, Assistant Planning Director at the Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share our work with the Council's climate change study we're calling Delta Adapts. It's very exciting. We just hit a major milestone and released the public draft of the vulnerability assessment last Friday, as Susan mentioned, and we're now in the middle of our 30-day review period. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Delta Adapts, as Susan mentioned, consists of both a vulnerability assessment and an adaptation strategy, and I'll be sharing some of those key findings from that assessment with you today. The overarching goal of Delta Adapts is to build climate resilience in the Delta. Next slide. We also have specific initiative goals, and that's to inform future work at the Council, help the state prioritize future actions and investments, provide a toolkit of information for local governments to use in their regulatory documents, and serve as a framework to be built upon by the Council and others in the future. Next slide. Delta Adapts is a regional study. We cover a large area, the entire Delta area and Sassoon Marsh. It's a planning level study designed to inform policy. There are a lot of other climate assessments that have been done by state agencies such as Caltrans and individual cities and counties in the Delta. But typically, these assessments really focus on assets those agencies own or analyze vulnerabilities based on a certain set of conditions. And Delta Adapts is different in that it really covers a broad range of asset types and climate change conditions. And it's really designed to be complementary with all of the other efforts that that are out there. So our study looks at a range of climate stressors and hazards. We look at the changes in air temperatures, precipitation, and sea level rise. And we also analyze the corresponding vulnerabilities related to extreme heat, wildfire, drought, and flooding. So based on these climate stressors and hazards, we've identified key findings for a variety of asset types in the vulnerability assessment. So I'll be highlighting those key findings for Delta's evolving place today, as well as ecosystems and water supply. So there's a lot more in the vulnerability assessment itself. So of course, I'm just giving you the big highlights today, and you should feel free to look through the document. There's a lot more good information in there. So starting with social vulnerability, as part of the vulnerability assessment, we conducted an equity analysis. For the first time, we identified the geographic areas of the Delta that contain the most socially vulnerable communities to the climate hazards we looked at. So we did this by creating a custom social vulnerability index that considers 14 different indicators. And then we looked at the block groups with high concentrations of those 14 indicators. And then we established a threshold, and then based on that, we were able to identify those highest socially vulnerable communities, or those communities with limited resources to prepare for and recover from climate change. And those three areas in the Delta are shown in the map there. You can see, or maybe a little tough to see, but it's in the dark orange. And those three main areas are really in the Stockton area, in the central Delta there, as well as the Pittsburgh, Antioch area, and then the northern part of West Sacramento. Next slide, please. And then here, this is the results of our flood analysis. These 4 maps show the likelihood of flooding during various planning horizons, starting with existing conditions on the far left. So the flood analysis only looks at overtopping of the levees only, does not look at failure of levees. And also our flood analysis assumed existing conditions for the levees. We did not assume any future improvements. So just for this analysis, we'll be looking at future investments as part of adaptation. So it's sort of like our baseline case, a no project alternative, if you will. So you can see here on the map that the likelihood of flooding in 2020 and 2030 are almost the same. About 10% of the Delta's land and 2% of the population is exposed to flooding in a 100-year flood during that time frame. And then at 2050, the third panel to the right, you can see now that there's substantial additional flooding throughout the central and south Delta. In here, 35% of the Delta's land area is flooded, and over 10% of the population is exposed to a 100-year flood. And so of that 10% population, approximately 65% of that are people living in communities that are considered highly socially vulnerable to flooding. And then if you look at the far map for 2085, you can see now that most of the South and Central Delta are exposed to flooding. And at a 100-year storm event, 68% of the Delta's land area and 20% of the Delta's population would be exposed to flooding. So much greater amounts of land area and people affected in a 100-year storm in 2085. You'll also notice that areas of the North Delta remain relatively secure here. Not much change in flooding, even with substantial climate change assumptions. And this really highlights the value of past flood management investments along the Sacramento and American rivers, and most importantly, the Yellow Bypass. Okay, so now moving on, I'm going to present a series of findings for asset types, and they're all based on the 2050 map that you just saw, that I just talked about. And so in addition to flooding, impacts on people and communities, our vulnerability assessment also looks at impacts from extreme heat and wildfire smoke. So in regards to extreme heat exposure, we use the state climate models to project extreme heat days for mid-century and end-of-century conditions. So the Delta region currently experiences less than 10 extreme heat days per year, and the models predict that that will increase to about 17 to 25 days per year. So all communities in the Delta will experience some increase in temperature and significant increase in those extreme heat days. But people in Stockton and Tracy have particularly high vulnerability because they'll experience the greatest change in that extreme heat days, and they have high social vulnerability to extreme heat. And these cities are projected to experience approximately 25 extreme heat days per year compared to the current 5. So it's a big change. And then based on our literature review and qualitative analysis of vulnerability to wildfire, we concluded that the greatest potential wildfire hazard is really the air quality impacts. So combined with air quality, we already expect to see, due to more extreme heat days, the air quality diminishes. This poses a risk to the health of the people and communities in the Delta. Now moving on to the next asset type of places. Here we look at the assets of cultural sites, critical facilities, and residential and commercial buildings. And again, similar to the last set of findings, we're looking at the same flood map, the 2050 conditions, and overlaid it over these assets. And through that analysis, we found that 6 culturally significant sites will be exposed to flooding, which obviously could destroy these areas and which have played a significant role in the Delta's history, these particular sites. And specifically, there are 4 historic sites, 3 of which are located in San Joaquin County, 1 in Isleton, and 2 legacy towns would be exposed to flooding in 2050, and that's includes Rio Vista and Isleton. We're looking at about flood exposure to about 11 life safety facilities. All are fire stations, 19 schools, and a number of wastewater treatment plants. And then moving on over to residential uses, about 17,000 parcels of residential uses would be exposed to flooding, and about 2,000 parcels of commercial and industrial uses would be exposed. And the combined values of those are close to $4 billion. And then now moving on to agriculture, obviously expected changes in climate conditions with flooding and warming temperatures and extreme precipitation have big impacts on Delta agriculture, some of which we're already seeing now. So flooding exposure is expected to impact approximately 35% of the land currently being farmed, which equates to about $72 million in assets in today's dollars, and an additional $79 million in annual economic activity would be interrupted, we assume 1 year, if flooding were to occur. And much of the ag land exposed to flooding in 2050 is really located in the San Joaquin and Sacramento counties. Some crops will benefit from a longer growing season due to the increased heat, but overall crop yields are expected to decrease with increased stress from the changes in temperature and the water quality itself. Summers will be longer and hotter with more extreme heat days, and there'll be less tule fog and winter chills, which fruit and nut trees really need to maximize their yield. Also, impacts from droughts and sea level rise together may create episodic negative impacts to water quality and soil salinity management. So warmer temperatures will favor yields of some Delta crops, but negatively affect others. And so while accelerated growth may positively influence some crop yields, it also may negatively impact overall crop quality. So those are some of the major findings of the agricultural literature review that we did. And now moving on to recreation, our flooding analysis shows exposure of about 45 parks and campgrounds by 2050. This is significant in the Delta because we're already short on areas accessible to the public as well as amenities. Specifically, 13 campgrounds would be exposed to flooding, and that represents about 1/4 of the campgrounds in the Delta. And most of those facilities are located in or near the cities of Stockton and Lathrop. And most of the trails and scenic highways affected are located in the Sacramento County. Increases in extreme heat may also negatively impact visitation to these recreational facilities. And drought conditions may also impact specific activities such as fishing and boating, which are popular activities in the Delta. And now moving on to infrastructure, we looked at impacts to energy and utilities, transportation, solid waste facilities, flood management, and water supply infrastructure. So in 2050, we're looking at a range of natural gas and oil pipelines and wells that could be exposed to flooding with an estimated value of about $800 million. And while the value of electrical facilities exposed to flooding total about $1.5 billion. The Delta is also home to regional transportation routes. So if flooded, that would obviously disrupt jobs and businesses. And flood exposure to roads are valued at about $1.1 billion, and railroad facilities valued at about $83 million. And some of these facilities also serve as evacuation routes. So if those evacuation routes are flooded, that would also pose a huge issue for the area. A number of solid waste facilities, contaminated sites, hazard waste facilities in the Delta would be exposed to flooding, and that obviously can cause risk to the health and safety of residents and the ecosystems with the potential release of toxic materials. Approximately 1,300 miles of Delta levees can be exposed to flooding, putting stress on the entire system of the flood management infrastructure protecting the area, and nearly 50 miles of water conveyance infrastructure. A number of state, local, and private points of diversions may also be impacted. So there would obviously be major consequences for users that rely on the Delta through those points of diversion. And then now moving on to water supply. We did do a very in-depth, detailed water supply analysis. We looked at what the existing system is sensitive to and how changes in temperature and sea level rise and precipitation affect the entire system. And through that analysis, we found that higher temperatures pose the greatest risk. More variable precipitation has greatest impacts during dry periods or droughts. And sea level rise is less of a concern for water supply relative to the other two factors. Higher temperatures mean more rain, less snow, and more runoff in the core winter months when we can't capture it in the reservoirs because we need it to provide flood protection. And when we get to the spring, when we traditionally have captured the runoff as snow melt occurs, there won't be much snow to melt and therefore much less water available for storage. More variable precipitation means there'll be more years that'll be wet, more years that'll be dry, and fewer years that will be average. And we're seeing that now living it here in California. And those additional wet years really don't provide much benefit for the system that we have today because we can't capture all of the additional runoff, and the additional dry years intensify and make those drought-like conditions even worse. So overall, we found that climate change will reduce Delta exports in all year types, but impacts will be disproportionately greater in those dry years. And this really highlights the need for Delta water users to continue their efforts to plan for future drought conditions. And then we also found through this analysis that the drought we experienced in 2012 and 2016 is 5 to 7 times more likely to occur by 2050. So again, that highlights the need for additional planning. And then ecosystems is the last asset types I wanted to talk about. The findings. Ecosystems here in the Delta are already heavily compromised, which reduces their resilience to climate change impacts. By 2050, we're looking at 55% of levied ecosystems will be exposed to flooding, and up to 100% of tidal wetlands will either become low marsh, which is a different type of marsh that it is now, or will drown. So the predicted increase in temperature will also adversely impact ecosystem health, and those increase in extreme heat days will adversely impact species survival. More frequent drought means water availability will be limited for ecosystems, and shorter rainy seasons also increase the stress for the ecosystems in the Delta. Water temperatures will increase, and that will negatively impact fish species. And floodplain ecosystems, which are really important ecologically, are highly sensitive to extended droughts. So all of this, paints a really bleak picture when it comes to ecosystems. But the good news is that there are many tools out there that we're going to be looking at and exploring in adaptation phase to help combat climate change as it relates to ecosystems. So those were the key findings for the vulnerability assessment. I just wanted to quickly share, as Susan mentioned, we've been at this for about 18 months to 2 years, and we've been actively engaging many folks in the Delta. And so we had ongoing collaboration with our agency partners where we shared data and built off of existing models that were already out there. We had a series of stakeholder briefings where we met with stakeholders to ground truth our data and verify our results. We also launched a significant effort to outreach to community-based organizations who helped us structure our engagement to reach vulnerable communities in the Delta. We have a technical advisory committee consisting of experts in the system and in climate change who really provided and guided our technical approach and analyses throughout the process. And we also have a stakeholder work group consisting of the local agencies in the Delta, cities, counties, regional groups, as well as environmental groups, water districts, who also provided input and feedback into our process. And so we do plan on continuing engagement with all of these partners as we move forward with adaptation. And lastly, I wanted to end my presentation on the significance of Delta Adapts. Though a lot of work has been done, this really is the first comprehensive climate change study in the Delta. We've also developed comprehensive flood and water supply models that can evaluate a wide range of conditions and are flexible to new information. So as conditions change, regulations change, we can modify and input new information to our models and rerun the analysis again easily. And all of this data is open source, and we're happy to share with others if they want to run their own analysis with their specific information. As I mentioned, another really significant part that's coming out of Delta Adapts is this development of the Social Vulnerability Index that I think will have long-term use and really allows us to focus where adaptation should occur and equitably in the Delta. And then lastly, we worked collaboratively with our agency partners in developing our methodology and sharing data, as I mentioned. And perhaps most importantly, through this process, we're really preparing climate studies that are complementary. So those are all very important aspects of Delta Adapts that I wanted to share. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that was a lot of information very quickly, but just wanted to move through it to give you an idea of the breadth of our analysis.
Thank you, Harriet. Thanks for certainly the summary presentation, but obviously there's a lot of information embedded there, and certainly a lot of work. Just maybe as you show the next steps here on the, so the assessment is out for 30-day public comment, and how is that being circulated? Was it just put up on the website, or was the folks who participated in the community outreach, were they on a list where they were pinged that this was available? Kind of just explain it if you got a moment. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we've been doing through our listserv and through all of our contacts and all of the folks that have helped us with this process. We have sent out the links that, in today's digital age, everything is, no hard copies, everything's online that we're sending out. And through our community-based organizations, we are sending them the links and some fact sheets and other more simpler synthesis of the vulnerability assessment that we're sharing with those folks for them to share with their constituents.
Just on that point, then the commission got a copy of your PowerPoint, and certainly the benefit of anybody that's tuning in today. Are commission members on the link to be noticed that this is available? Obviously, it's on our agenda, so I trust people can find that. But did they get noticed individually, or just did the commission get it and then leave it to Erik or somebody to disseminate to us? Or
yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say that we have not specifically asked for commission members to be added to that email distribution list. Okay. We can, and we'll provide those to Harriet and her team if you all so wish.
Yeah, people are okay with that. It just seems to me with the presentation, I mean, you've, I think, teased us to the degree that you've introduced it and given a good explanation, but there's a lot there, so people may want to go in and begin to, I think, really dive into the information, and obviously leave it to folks to do that on their own. But yeah, so unless there's any objections, I think it might be a good way to make sure it gets out to this current audience, which obviously plays to a much bigger audience with representation from cities, counties, reclamation districts, state agencies, and so forth. And again, this is a good body of work, so I think that'd be helpful. Okay. Well, Erik, I know you wanted to ask a couple questions. Let me ask commission members though first, if there's any questions or comments surrounding Harriet's presentation, and I'll turn to commission members here for a moment and bring it back to Erik and to the public.
Mr. Chair, this is again Commissioner Egar.
Yes.
Just a quick comment. Again, thank you, Harriet, for your presentation. You did answer some of my questions, and I do also agree that getting a copy of this through another email through Executive Director Vink would be appreciated. I'll do my part to make sure that Caltrans provides their comments as well. In, like you said, we're part of that stakeholder meetings, and a lot of that's probably coming from our headquarters office in Sacramento. But I'd like to make sure that our districts who also have vulnerability assessments take a look at this and making sure that we're pretty consistent, and look forward to, again, a further partnership as we put together our climate adaptation report together for Caltrans statewide. So, but thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Yeah, thank you, Dennis. I understand Commissioner Vasquez wants to comments.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Harriet, so I also sit on BCDC, and we've done this, in the Bay itself, adapting to sea level rise and the climate change. And I saw that you did some work in Suisun Marsh regarding the Suisun Marsh, or at least looked at it. How is this being coordinated between the two agencies?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely happy to answer that. We actually have regular meetings with BCDC staff, and we as late as just a couple of days ago, we met specifically on coordinating on in the Suisun Marsh. So I think we plan on. Oh, and I should also mention BCDC staff is on our technical advisory committee, and other staff from BCDC are on our stakeholder work group. So there's a lot of coordination going on, and mostly in the Suisun Marsh and in East Contra Costa County. So the council funded a portion of the East Contra Costa County art project, the Adapting to Rising Tides project for that area. So there's been a lot of coordination around this whole topic.
So when do you think a presentation to the BCDC Commission might occur?
We're happy to do, if there's interest, we're happy to make that now if you'd like.
Well, in particular, because you have two counties, Solano and Contra Costa, that have 1 foot in the Delta and 1 foot in the Bay. And right. That we're impacted by what happens in the Bay and what happens in the Delta. So I won't speak for Diane, but certainly as soon as we can get this information out, I'm going to send it to all the agencies that I know that might be affected by it and the work we're doing.
Yeah, I agree, and I do appreciate the work that you're doing with the Adapting Rising Tide. Am I saying that right?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thanks, John. Thanks, Diane. Other commissioners? Questions, comments? Yes.
Commissioner Villegas. Yeah, just a quick question. First of all, thank you, Harriet, for the presentation. I think I've seen it 4 or 5 times now. And
I'm so sorry.
You can give it.
No, actually, it's good because I think, frankly, I think everybody ought to see it 4 or 5 times because every time I've seen it, I've conjured up different images in my head about just how incredibly important this is and how important it's going to be. And so I think the deep dive that's occurring as it relates to the vulnerability will lend itself to some obvious and some not so obvious adaptation strategies. And so I think it's incredibly important that we're doing this now. And so the question that I have this go round is where do you or what do you foresee its practical utility when it's done? In other words, you'll have a deep dive into the vulnerabilities, you'll have a deep dive into adaptation strategies, a whole range of things, everything from how to protect the water quality, the levees, the ecosystems, everything, right? And so everything will be in here. And when it's in there, there's nothing worse than something like this just sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. And so I wondered if you can provide any insight about its practical utility, and is it possible that then this becomes a springboard for even more work in different sectors, right? Because obviously this won't be able to capture everything, but it'll certainly shed light on the things that we all know at this point are going to be huge challenges going forward. And so I just wondered, in terms of practical applicability and utility, where do you see this landing, or how do you see it being used?
Yeah, so firstly, climate change, the whole climate change science is changing constantly. So even though a number of cities, counties, state agencies have done their own assessments, things keep changing and it's dynamic. So right now, our study makes some a broad range of assumptions for the future and takes into a broad range of climate conditions in the future. So we look at just a broader probability of things occurring. And we look at a whole bunch of different things that not all other assessments out there have looked at. So I would have to say our assessment is more comprehensive and really represents the best available science at this point. So from a practical standpoint, even if other jurisdictions and agencies have their own reports, they could look at ours under our assumptions, which reflect what we think, the latest best available science of what climate change will do in the Delta and in this region, that's newer information. So, and I've always said some of these local jurisdictions, for example, just don't really have, the budget or the time to put forth into addressing climate change. And this gives those agencies a background, a baseline to see what could be flooded in the future. What are the potential climate impacts? And so that's a starting point for many agencies that haven't done their own work. So from that standpoint, I think whether you've done something or haven't done any climate assessments, our study is still very important. For adaptation, again, we'll be looking at it from a regional perspective. And I'm not sure where that's going to take us yet. And we've been working on this vulnerability assessment for 2 years. And, we kind of have some ideas for adaptation, but, we don't really know. We haven't had those conversations, and we plan on launching a stakeholder outreach program in the next couple months to kind of get other people's thoughts. But the idea is that there will be a regional strategy for adaptation. Again, how individual agencies or jurisdictions fit into that, that's to remain to be seen. But the idea is that we'll have a regional strategy that we have shopped around and talked with others to prepare together. So I see a lot of practical utility for this document. Just simply, this work hasn't been done at this scale yet.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would just leave, if I could, Mr. Chair, just one final comment. I would encourage you to find a way, in the event possible, to get this into the hands of the local elected officials, the local governing bodies throughout the entire Delta. There should be nobody that works in the Delta or proximate to the Delta that has not seen the work that you've done to date, because it's very well laid out, and should be invited, frankly, to participate in the next aspects of the adaptation component. Everybody should see it. Everybody should be aware of the work that you're doing as they move forward with their own environmental work. So thank you.
Chair Natoli, Commissioner Slater and Commissioner Vasquez both have raised hands.
Yes, I'll get right to them. I just wanted to echo comments to Oscar's point about getting it widely distributed. I think that good places to start would be with county executives, city managers, general managers of reclamation districts, but certainly to planning folks, because I can tell you, at least from Sacramento County's perspective, we're working on a climate action plan. Obviously, Delta is a big component of the land area, and certainly very important for all the reasons why the commission's task in charge exists. And I just think, again, without burdening Harriet, you or other staff, I think to Oscar's point, and not just for the comment period, but to widely disseminate this, because again, if nothing else, for a point of reference as relates to the work you've done, and how it might integrate to other work that's been done or going, contemplated being done. I just think that the broader dissemination makes good sense. So I just wanted to echo those comments. So let me turn to Commissioner Slater, then Commissioner Vasquez. Tom.
Yeah, I won't chew up too much more time. I couldn't agree more. That was an outstanding presentation, and we need to see all those things. So if you could include us, or somehow, Eric, get us a copy of that. I represent a reclamation district in many North Delta, and it's very appreciative. So keep up the good work, and it's a good time to get it out. I'm anxious to see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, John.
I'll make a little cynical comment. Has the state looked at it? Because doing the restoration of the Delta, it may be flooded in some years to come. I hope they're putting it at the right elevations. The other point, Oscar, you said you don't want to see it on the shelf. What it takes funding to finance it. So BCDC and representatives of the Bay from all over have been looking at a funding plan. In 2018, Los Angeles County passed what they called Measure W, which puts a certain amount of tax on all hard surface, to begin to work on that issue of the rising tides. And so I think there are good examples out there of what people have been doing. And it's good to know that we're looking at it from the Delta perspective. And as I said, from BCDC, we've been doing it for a few years. In fact, I did a climate action sea level rise workshop in 2015, both Supervisor Sperry and myself. And we intentionally didn't invite electeds. We invited engineers, people who have to look at these things, make sure that your intakes and your outflows are all in the right spot, and get them to start thinking about this. Because electeds come and go, and so where you're really going to need the work is in the staff who know and keep the work moving forward. Anyway, that's.
Thanks, John. Good comments. Harriet, you want to respond to any of those comments?
Yeah, I think funding is the key to making adaptation work, and that'll be interesting. I think there was a climate resilience bond, big discussions on that, but then COVID hit and that kind of went away. So I think that is going to be key to implementing adaptation, and not just for the Delta, but for everywhere else.
Just maybe to ask on a point, are you, I assume you have the capability then to more broadly disseminate this, and I would say that if you needed, any, list, so to speak, or contacts, as mentioned by several commissioners here, certainly reach out. You may have those. Erik certainly is a good resource for those as well. But if we can help, I think getting this down to, colleagues, certainly, not only at the state and local level, but into the communities and such, I think we'll all be better served by the good body of work. So if you need any help, certainly, you work through me as chair with Erik as executive director, or any member of the commission, I'm sure would be glad to assist with contact points to get this information out.
Absolutely, will do.
Thanks. Any other hands up then, Madam Clerk?
I don't see any, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
There is one hand, Gilbert Castillo.
Oh, Gil Costello. Okay, is that a member of the public? Or
Yes,
Gil?
sir.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to Gil, and then I know, Erik, you wanted to weigh in before we conclude the item. So at this point, there's no further commission comments or questions. We'll go to members of the public, and Gil, you're up. Mr. Costello.
Thanks, Chair Natoli. First, I want to confirm that Harriet and her group did reach out quite a bit to locals. I was on the technical advisory committee and also part of the stakeholder group that helped them interpret some of the flood impacts. And so we appreciate that. I've seen the presentation a lot too. And I'm always amazed how calm Harriet is when she talks about 2085 and all the disastrous stuff that's going to happen. I'm just glad none of us will probably be around it by 2085, but we'll see what happens.
Maybe Harriet will be, but
She plans to be.
Okay.
And she's still calm about it too, Gil.
Yeah. But what I like about this report is that we're finally getting some numbers, and it's backed up by their models. The climate change and sea level rise in the Delta has always been this: is it 3 feet or 10 feet? And these are coming closer to 3 feet on the lower end, which for the most part, in the 37 years I worked out there, we've been able to handle levees that were needed more than 3 feet of work on them. So, in my mind, this is our marching order. What do we do next? One thing I think that the council should think about, and I'm happy to see that as Susan reported, the Stewardship Council is going to be looking more at social science. They've got a social scientist on board. The ISB is going to be studying more about social science, and that's really going to tell us what's the vulnerability of Delta's place. There's going to be a tipping point where farming is no longer viable. The communities are no longer viable, and that's going to be kind of critical. Is there a tipping point, and should be that be our marching orders for the future? How do we plan to either expect the loss of Delta's place, or can we plan to perpetuate the Delta if society determines it's that valuable. So it'll be interesting to see how these things turn out. From a flood control standpoint, like I said, I think we're in pretty good shape as far as planning for the future, and hopefully funds become available to help us do that. There was one area of concern that the stakeholders brought up from flooding standpoint. That was in the South Delta. There's some controversy on the hydrology of the San Joaquin River, and some of the areas that are being designed currently to protect urban areas, including sea level rise and climate change impacts, are being showed as being flooded. And so hopefully those stakeholders can provide information during the comment period to work with the council to get that rectified if that's the case. So otherwise, I think the fact that we're getting numbers is great. It is kind of a moving target, and they'll probably change in the future, but at least we're kind of starting out in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks for your contributions always as well.
I don't have a way to raise my hand on my computer. I've checked all the different options.
Okay. Hi, is it Paul Seeger?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great.
I could just make this very quick. Harriet, thank you for your presentation. I participated in BCDC's East Contra Costa Adapting to Rising Tides project. It's interestingly, I contacted the person that was putting that together out here in East Contra Costa, Samantha Cohen, just yesterday, asking her if she would make a presentation at our water district. I'm currently the president of our board, and our agenda comes out tomorrow for our next Wednesday's meeting. And I would like for us to be able to vote on becoming a stakeholder or an agency that is working with you. We are currently working on our hazard and vulnerability assessment plan that's due to the EPA, and I'm forcing this stuff to happen right now. So this is all great timing because this is all in the forefront of what we're doing, and we'd really like I think we'd really like to be a part of this project. Is there any way that we can be in contact so that I can let my general manager know tonight that I'd like this to be on the agenda? I need to know what it is that we're going to be saying to do, so we can vote on that.
Are you asking to serve on our stakeholder work group, or you just want more information, or are you looking for a presentation?
We're looking for a presentation, definitely. But what I'd like to vote on is for our board to become one of those municipalities or a jurisdiction, an official jurisdiction. And we are in a very vulnerable area. Bethel Island is definitely a DPAC. We're doing everything we can to help them. Our jurisdiction right now is Oakley, Bethel Island, and part of Knightson. So there's a lot of vulnerability here.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you can send me your contact information or send it through Erik, and I will be happy to talk with you tomorrow or next week, and we can definitely add you to the stakeholder work group.
Let me offer a suggestion.
Okay, well, I was going to see if I can get it on the agenda for next Wednesday, so I'd have to get it in by tonight. But I can work on that. We can wait till next month, I think.
Paul, this is Chairman Tully. Let me offer this. Maybe this is going to conclude here in a moment, and maybe there's a way to facilitate offline that you and Harriet could talk this evening, and maybe, again, obviously you have some, sense of urgency around this. And if there is the ability, again, not knowing, people's constraints relative to time, understanding yours, maybe there's a way that you folks could, even as this evening, assuming Harriet's willing at least have that conversation offline with you, as soon as you get done with this item, and then you folks can kind of figure out what's the best path forward for, certainly agendizing the item and contemplating action your board might have, but also then working with Harriet and her staff as to how to, get a presentation at the earliest date. How's that sound?
Yeah, okay, so you're saying stick around till after and then you're gonna make.
Yeah, or I can
Harriet
have
stay
Eric,
too.
let me ask Eric, is there a way to facilitate, maybe Paul can send an email to you or whatever, to you put Harriet together?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, these two have the ability to chat with each other, and
Okay.
this meeting is going to continue for a few more minutes. So
Yeah.
maybe when this item is concluded, and I do have one thing I'd like to mention to the commission before we conclude it. Maybe the two of them could have a little chat and take it offline.
Okay, so stand by, Paul, and Harry, Eric's got a couple questions here, so stand by for a moment and then we'll.
Yeah, they can chat with each other through the chat function.
Okay.
I've gone to that right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the only thing I wanted to mention, by the way, really appreciate the presentation. I do, and thank you, Commissioner Burgess, for Paul's contact information.
You're welcome.
I did want to mention that your commission staff has been participating in both the the stakeholder and the technical working groups, and we will continue to do so. The vulnerability assessment is a very important cornerstone to this effort, but the rubber will meet the road in the adaptation strategy. And so we will be stepping up our activity to participate and monitor as the Stewardship Council segues into the part 2 of this work, the adaptation strategy. And I did want to draw commission members' attention to page 3 of the staff report that accompanied this item. And I would like to bring to the commission, maybe even as early as the next commission meeting, some guiding principles for the Delta Stewardship Council, for the Delta Protection Commission, that can inform your staff's involvement as we move deeper into the adaptation strategy. And these were very roughly drafted by myself. They can absolutely be improved upon, but I think the level of detail is the level that would help us. And I won't read all of them off, but the first one I think is very important, and I will just mention it, that where we talk about the importance of continued improvements to Delta levees. I appreciate Harriet's mention that their assumption was no improvements in Delta levees. I think that's not a judgment of any kind. I think it's just they needed to have a baseline assumption. It's too difficult to make assumptions about how you will improve Delta levees. But I think it's important for our group, as the entity that understands the levees are the foundation for everything that matters to us in the Delta, to have a very firm comment that there will continue to be the need for maintenance and improvement to Delta levees as we, adapt to sea level rise and the other climate effects. And then there's other proposed principles that are in the staff report. We can have a discussion of it now, but if commission members would like to review that and offer any thoughts to me, we'll develop them further. But before we get too much into, too deeper into the adaptation work that the council will be doing, I would like for us to have this adopted by the commission to guide our comments moving forward. I think it will be very important.
Good. Thanks, Eric. I think it makes good sense. Unless anybody sees it differently, I think coming back at our March meeting, I think that still fits the time frame. Would allow folks to, I think, further reflect not only on the presentation that Harriet offered, maybe get a chance to look at the plan, I think, and then reflect on what you've put forward, suggestions for guiding principles for commission work and engagement, Eric. I think that makes good sense. So I think unless there's any objections to doing that, we ought to, keep this item pended for the March agenda. And again, if there are comments or thoughts prior to that agenda, certainly going back through Eric, so we can have a, I think we ought to schedule it for an action item and greater discussion. Since we're running a little close on time here this evening and we got a couple other items, I would suggest we do it that way, Eric, if you're okay with that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that timing makes sense.
Okay, well, very good. And, I appreciate your point too, Eric, because it kind of goes back to what Mr. Casio said, just about, you get good data and so forth. And so, if it's, for sea level rise, if it's 3 foot over X amount of years, what sort of investments are needed in order to continue to offer protection that, again, protects the assets that are so important to, as you said, to everything that, is a part of the Delta life and Delta as a place. I didn't mean to cut it off. Were there any other public comments? Either hands raised? Again, thanks to Paul and Gil. Were there anybody else that wanted to address this item from the public?
There's no hands raised currently.
None?
Just
Okay.
want to remind people that there is the function to raise your hand under the reactions button usually, and then there's a raise a hand button there. Also, if you're on the phone, you press #2 to raise your hand.
Okay. Anybody else? Again, it sounds like we'll be back to talk about, certainly additional commission involvement and engagement at our March meeting. So this isn't the last opportunity. And okay, well then, again, thank you so much, Harriet. Again, thanks to Susan. This was helpful and informative. And for those that have even seen it multiple times, you got kudos. So that's good. So you'll do your work to get this out more broadly, and expectation that we'll be back to the council, back to the commission, excuse me, in March. And if there is a necessity, I guess, Erik, to invite Harriet to back as we're talking about this, or you're certainly welcome to be a part of that. But I think if there was any supplemental information that you thought might be helpful in light of our consideration of guiding principles, certainly Harriet, you and others, and Susan as well, feel free to weigh in our meetings as well. So, okay. All right, so this is a presentation on an action item for this session. So we thank our presenters and our guests. And with that, unless there's anything else, we'll go forward with the next item then. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, I know we're getting a little tight on our time here, so let's, with that, move to item 10, which is a report on our economic sustainability plan, the recreation and tourism chapter that we've been working on for some time, or we being certainly led by program manager Virginia Gardiner, and there's some recommendations embodied in today's staff report. So Erik, did you want to introduce us before we?
No, if Virginia could kick it off, and I'll just depend on at the end. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, Virginia, it's yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Natoli and commissioners.
Good evening.
As you just heard, it's Virginia Gardiner, your program manager, one of your program managers here at the commission. We just wanted to give you a quick update, can be very brief here, but we do want to get to the recommendation question that Erik will pose for you. Basically, when we met in November, we presented you with sort of an overview of the report in its draft form with the executive summary. And we laid out the lists of constraints to basically obstacles to recreation in the Delta and tourism. And then also the recommendations that we've determined would have the most benefit to the highest impact economic sectors of within the recreation and tourism sector. So since we met with you in November, the commission staff has continued to present to and outreach to groups. We've presented to a workshop in December, which is outlined in your staff report, so I won't dive into that. Suffice to say that what we focused on with getting input from the group that was at the December 16th workshop was to weigh in on whether we covered all the constraints adequately, had we omitted anything that people are finding to be obstacles, and had we missed on any recommendations also. So we had a really good discussion on that, and I'm going to turn it over to Erik to, we are also continuing in January with a workshop next week on Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m., which we've advertised widely and encourage everyone to let your constituents know if they're interested in participating. And we're also meeting in one-on-one and small groups with specific outreach to local governments, parks departments, economic development groups, and so forth. So we're still in an input collection mode. But we will be wrapping up so that we can finalize the report. We'll accept comments from the public through the 29th of January, which is Friday of next week. And of course, we'll always accept additional comments, but we won't be able to necessarily incorporate them into the final plan, which will be presented to you in March. So with that, unless anyone has any particular questions about the outreach, I'm going to turn it over to Erik regarding our recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. Maybe I can just wrap this up quickly, and then if there are any questions or comments from commission members or public comment, we'll take it at that time. So where we're headed with this is honing in on a recommendation to have a responsible entity, or what we call a facilitator organization, focus on these proposed improvements. And I guess the question I wanted to plant in commission members' minds is for the commission to perform that function as the facilitating entity. And considerations in regard to that are, number one, what we would be doing is to convene state and local agencies and Delta recreation stakeholders to work on this. We don't have the bandwidth, the resources, the ability to do this on our own. It is going to have to be a group effort, but it will need to be led by someone. And it's possible for the commission to do that. We would have to look carefully at what activities we would be letting go of or de-emphasizing to put additional effort into this. And so that's something I just wanted to draw to your attention. How does this work stack up against other commission work? And that's probably something that factors into our last agenda item, reviewing our strategic plan. It will be especially important to have local agencies involved in this. So, you know, we can take the lead, but if we don't have healthy involvement from local agencies, which play a critical role in a lot of these proposed recommendations, then it'll be very difficult to make progress. So if the commission is the facilitating entity, we're going to need your help. And I'm looking at the commission members representing local agencies. We're going to need your help to ensure that we're reaching the right people within, you know, your organizations and ensuring that they're bought into this and participating as well. So that goes along with being the facilitator organization, and something I'd like for you to consider. We don't have to come to a decision tonight. This could be folded into the ultimate recommendation we bring to the commission, which at this point, as Virginia indicated, we're planning to do that at the March meeting. We haven't really unearthed any incredible controversies yet with this report that's been pulled together. We're getting input from the Delta community that's helping refine particular approaches to how we implement recommendations. But you know, I don't see anything in this report that will generate immense controversy. The important question is, where do we take it from here, and how can we make improvements in the recreation and tourism economy and the infrastructure that supports it? So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. And again, if there are any questions for either of us, we'd be happy to take them.
Okay, no, thanks, Eric. That's what I was just going to suggest. Let's see if we got some questions. And again, I think you're seeking some input, obviously, with, you know, any guidance direction that comes with it this evening. But then it sounds like this will be teed up for us in March. But so let me put it out to commission members. Thoughts or comments about certainly the work, the outreach, but also then I think the, you know, contemplation that we would play a a role, maybe even a lead role, but obviously with, some help and support anticipated as well by other entities. So. Any thoughts, questions, folks?
I like the idea of being a part of this, and if it works for us to take a lead role on it, I think it makes sense. We are always trying to make the point that the Delta is a place, and so I think by highlighting these efforts, we are furthering that goal.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Bishop Villegas, did you have your hand raised? Look like.
No, totally agree.
Okay, thanks. Other commissioners?
Okay, well, yeah, and Mr. Chair, we'll have more to come on this when we next meet, and just wanted to give you a quick update on it this evening.
Oh, okay, good. No, I appreciate the thought that's gone into it, and certainly, just reflect that is looking at what was covered here and the amount of outreach. But I think to Diane's comment, this is probably an opportunity ongoing for us to play, an important, and I think kind of a cornerstone role in, one of the three legs of, important activities in the Delta, certainly that being the recreational aspect of economic development aspect. So how we figure that into the work plan ongoing and such, obviously maybe a bit of a challenge, but I would concur that I think it's important. So with that, then we'll contemplate this and the previous item is being back before us then March, and you'll be seeking direction, it sounds like, further direction on this item and maybe some other action on this as well. So, okay, very good. Thanks, Virginia. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Okay, but before we leave though, any public comments on this? I certainly don't want to shortcut that. Any hands up or any commenters?
No hands up currently.
Okay, good. Well, thanks to all out there who participated or following this. Obviously, that's vital to having a good plan and recommendations coming forward. So, all righty. Well, we're down to item 11 on our agenda, which is the report on review of the Vision 2030 plan, Commission strategic plan. And Eric, I think this is your item.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be brief. So a reminder to all, Vision 2030 is the Commission's strategic plan, which was adopted in May of 2015. And we've been reviewing Vision 2030. It started with a staff review in November of 2020. We've received help from Lisa Butler from Stantec, who I also neglected to say earlier is going to be leading our personal strategic planning seminars for the Delta Leadership Program alumni. And I noted that Lisa joined the meeting. She loves us so much that she's here off the clock to listen to this part of the discussion. So thank you, Lisa. We're not paying her for this evening. So anyway, Lisa has been helping us on this. We reviewed it with the advisory committee with DPAC. We gave it some additional staff review. At this point, what I'm anticipating is that we will have some modest revisions to the strategic plan, in part reflecting the accomplishments. We've had a few, including permanent status for the Delta Levy Subventions Program, not entirely due to our good work, but in part, and also the adoption of the National Heritage Area, which similarly, not entirely due to our good work, but in part. And then in addition, we want to identify any new challenges. We've identified a few so far, and just also generally clean up the document. We had some repetition and some items that we don't believe are any longer strategic and relevant for the Commission. So the next step is to, I'll be working with the chair to review a proposed revised strategic plan before we do some additional outreach, and that will include the DPAC and probably other public outreach as well, to the extent that we can attract it for this effort. And then I intend to bring that back to the commission as proposed revisions to Vision 2030. So we'll still have a strategic plan that looks out ahead 10 years, but we definitely want it to be as up to date as possible to help inform our yearly implementation and work planning efforts that go follow on the strategic plan. So that's all I wanted to present, Mr. Chair and commission members. If you all had any thoughts at this point, I'd love to hear them. If you have any thoughts offline, I'm always open to those as well.
Okay, turn to the commission. Thoughts, comments? I think that's some affirmation, some good work there, Eric. I don't hear any comments at this point. So, but I do think that folks want to reflect on some more, weigh in either this evening or to Eric, offline, as he said.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could, at this point, probably what would be most helpful is if there's anything that any commission member feels we missed completely in the 2015 plan, okay, those would be important. We'll do the other editing work and handle that pretty easily. But if there are new challenges or challenges we didn't quite describe in the way we should have in the 2015 plan, this would be a great time to rectify that.
Okay. Pose the question. Any hands up? Any omissions or shortfalls, shortcomings that people have noted that you want Eric and staff to take and their consultant take into account? Don't see any. No, any hands up?
No hands up currently.
Okay, don't want to miss anybody. All right, Eric. So I'd say proceed at this point. Then and again, if somebody thinks of something, again, you don't have to wait till next meeting. Certainly reach out to Eric and we can include those comments. So, all right, let me go to public comments. Then, do we have any members of the public that wish to weigh in on the Vision 2030 strategic plan?
No hands raised.
Thank you. All right. So this is just a report. So you'll be back. Is this one you anticipate in March as well, Eric? Another one or later in the spring?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
So do you anticipate this coming back in March or later in the spring?
I would think probably later in the spring.
Okay. All right. Trying to look at agenda management over here too.
Yeah,
okay,
probably May is my guess, but we might have something available by March. But
okay. Now pushing. I just was trying to think about, could we get some items? Okay. Very good. All right. Anything else, Eric, that you thought of when we went down through the agenda? We're to the point of adjournment here, but before I do that, I would turn to council members one more time, or commission members one more time. Any other items either for future agenda and or comments or announcements?
Chair Natoli, I just wanted to echo your welcome to Council Member Fuller from Oakley. You have 2 Oakleyites on the commission.
All right. Okay. All right, they're taking over. Here they come. Diane and Mr. Fuller, George. Okay, very good. Anything else? If not, then we just a few minutes after 6, and thank you. Efficient agenda, and again, some very substantive items this evening, as always, and appreciate the feedback and our public engagement as well. So, all right, Eric. So next meeting will be March 18th, 19th?
18th.
18th, March 18th, same time, same place. I trust we'll still be on Zoom.
I'm pretty sure we'll still be on the Zoom channel.
Okay, maybe by May or shortly thereafter, we can get back together again and start rotating to our Delta communities. But in the meantime, people stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. And thank you so much, everyone. And again, thanks to our presenters, our guests, our public, and certainly commission members for all your good work today and all the days ahead. So with that, we'll stand in adjournment and see you all back March 18th, 4 o'clock.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Aye.
Aye.